Every serious analytical framework begins with a foundational question. In this case, the question is deceptively simple. What is the probability that 11 researchers connected through classified defense research institutions, connected through a single commanding officer, died or disappeared under suspicious circumstances within a compressed time frame purely by chance? The answer, when approached through the lens of probability analysis rather than institutional reluctance to draw uncomfortable conclusions, is not a comfortable one. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has now opened a formal probe into the deaths and disappearances of at least 11 United States scientists. These individuals worked in the most sensitive research areas of the American defense complex: advanced aerospace propulsion, nuclear technology, novel materials science, directed energy systems. They held security clearances at high and top levels. Many of them are connected through institutional relationships at the Air Force Research Laboratory, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and NASA. Many more are connected through a single human node: General William Neil McCaslin, the commanding officer who oversaw funding for 80% of the United States military's special access programs, the most tightly classified research operations in the American defense apparatus. General McCaslin has himself now disappeared. This analysis applies the analytical frameworks used in counterintelligence assessment to the pattern of cases before us. Counterintelligence analysis is a specific discipline. It asks not what happened to any individual, but what pattern emerges from multiple events, who benefits from that pattern, what kind of actor has the capability to produce that pattern, and what the institutional and evidentiary record tells us about how to investigate it. By those standards, what is happening to American defense researchers is one of the most significant counterintelligence developments of the current decade, and it demands to be analyzed with the seriousness it deserves, rather than being deflected by the institutional reflexes that have kept the public from understanding its full dimensions. The counterintelligence framework for analyzing this cluster of cases begins with a concept that experienced investigators apply to any pattern of suspicious events: the null hypothesis test. The null hypothesis in this context is that the deaths and disappearances of these 11 connected scientists are unrelated events, coincidental in their timing and their institutional connections, explicable by the ordinary rates of death, disappearance, and personal crisis that affect any population of similarly sized individuals working in any field. Testing that hypothesis requires examining whether the specific characteristics of these events are consistent with random occurrence. Random occurrence does not produce a consistent behavioral signature across geographically separated individuals. If the pattern of leaving behind all identifying objects before disappearing appeared in one case, it would be a distinctive behavioral fact about that individual. If it appeared in two cases connected to the same institution, it would be a notable coincidence. When it appears across multiple cases in multiple states among individuals connected to the same classified research infrastructure, the null hypothesis fails. Random events do not produce this kind of cross-case behavioral consistency. Random occurrence does not reliably connect the victims of apparent suicides and accidental deaths to individuals who had previously communicated fears for their safety to trusted contacts. Amy Eskridge told Frank Milbour explicitly and in writing that if she was found dead from suicide, she did not do that to herself. She was then found dead from an officially ruled self-inflicted gunshot wound. Matthew Sullivan was scheduled to testify before Congress about classified UAP intelligence and died before he could. Joshua LeBlanc's vehicle, by the data in its own Sentry system, was at an airport for 4 hours before he burned in a crash whose cause has not been publicly explained. These are not the characteristics of random, accidental, or self-inflicted deaths. They are the characteristics of events that were preceded by specific circumstances that a counterintelligence analyst would flag as warranting investigation. Random occurrence does not produce the consistent silence of families across multiple cases in multiple states. Bereaved families, in the ordinary course of human grief and human communication, speak. They give interviews, they share their experiences, they reach out to journalists, to advocacy organizations, to anyone who might help them understand what happened to someone they loved. The consistent cross-case silence of the families connected to the missing and dead scientists, documented and noted by multiple investigators and journalists who have pursued this story, is not the silence of grief. It is the silence of people who are afraid of what speaking might cause. That fear, shared consistently across multiple families who have no other obvious connection to each other, is a data point. The null hypothesis, applied honestly to the available facts, does not survive. What is happening to these scientists is not random. It is patterned, and patterns require causes. The analytical step from rejected null hypothesis to candidate causes involves what counterintelligence professionals call a capabilities assessment. Which actors have the operational capability to produce this specific pattern? Who has the ability to conduct multi-year harassment campaigns using directed energy weapons and systematic digital intrusion? Who has the motivation to target specifically this population of researchers working in specifically these research areas? Who has the operational security to do so while evading counterintelligence detection for the duration? The candidates are not numerous, they are specific. And the FBI's entry into this investigation signals that the Bureau has made the same assessment. The research that these scientists were conducting is the key to understanding the motivation for targeting them. And it requires careful, specific explanation rather than the vague reference to advanced research that has characterized much of the public coverage. Amy Eskridge was working on anti-gravity jet propulsion. This is not a theoretical physics exercise. It is the development of a propulsion system that would allow an aircraft to generate and direct its own gravitational field, enabling movement in any direction at any speed, unconstrained by the physical limitations that bind all currently operational aircraft. A conventional airplane generates lift through the interaction of its wings with air, requires forward motion to maintain altitude, and is fundamentally constrained by the physics of fluid dynamics. An aircraft operating on anti-gravity principles would be free of those constraints. It could hover, accelerate vertically, change direction instantaneously, and achieve speeds that conventional propulsion cannot approach. She was specifically working on a triangular aircraft configuration known as a TR-3B, a design that has appeared in UAP witness reports from multiple credible military and civilian sources over decades. The fact that she was working on this design, combined with the fact that her research was sufficiently advanced to attract what appears to have been a sustained suppression campaign, suggests that her work was closer to practical application than the conventional scientific community's skepticism about such technologies would imply. Monica Reza was working on an advanced alloy called Manderley, engineered for extreme heat resistance for use on rocket systems. The significance of a heat-resistant alloy capable of withstanding the temperatures generated by next-generation rocket propulsion is straightforward. Without materials that can survive those temperatures, the engines cannot be built. Reza's material science research was therefore a critical enabling technology for advanced aerospace development. Former FBI supervisory agent John Nance noted that Reza's work had a specific additional connection: her research into memory metal, a material whose properties have been discussed in congressional testimony in connection with materials allegedly recovered from non-human origin craft and delivered to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Whether that connection is direct or circumstantial, the strategic value of her material science research is not in dispute. Joshua LeBlanc at NASA in Huntsville, Alabama, was working on nuclear propulsion. Nuclear propulsion for spacecraft represents the enabling technology for deep space travel at timescales that make human missions to Mars and beyond practically feasible. It is also a technology with obvious weapons applications. A 29-year-old nuclear scientist with access to this research represents a concentration of knowledge that a competitor nation would assign significant intelligence value to acquiring. Melissa Casillas at Los Alamos National Laboratory worked with the research infrastructure that encompasses both nuclear weapons and advanced energy research. Her administrative role at both Los Alamos and the Air Force Research Laboratory placed her at the intersection of multiple classified research streams with access to personnel, project, and funding information that was not itself classified at the highest levels, but that in aggregate provided a comprehensive picture of the research landscape that a sophisticated intelligence operation would find valuable. The common thread across these research areas is that they collectively represent the leading edge of American capabilities in the technologies that will determine military and strategic superiority in the coming decades. Advanced propulsion that exceeds anything in current operational service. Materials that enable the construction of vehicles and weapon systems that current materials cannot support. Nuclear technology applied to the propulsion that will make space-based operations practical. All of it concentrated in a research infrastructure administered and funded by a single commanding officer who is himself now missing. If a foreign intelligence service or a private actor with the resources and motivation to do so wanted to simultaneously map, access, disrupt, or eliminate the American research program in these areas, targeting the individuals who know the most about what has been achieved would be the most efficient approach. You do not need to penetrate the classified databases if you can reach the people who carry that knowledge in their minds. You do not need to steal the research if you can acquire the researcher. And if acquisition is not possible, elimination removes the knowledge permanently and signals to others working in the same field that their work carries mortal risk. Subscribe now to follow this analysis as the investigation develops. The implications of what the FBI is investigating extend far beyond the individual cases and into the question of whether the American research enterprise is being systematically targeted. You need to be here for every update. The analytical framework for understanding who might be behind this pattern requires engaging with a question that institutional caution has kept at the margins of the public conversation. What does the operational profile of the targeting tell us about the actor responsible? The operational profile has specific characteristics that constrain the field of candidates significantly. Duration. The harassment campaign against Amy Eskridge lasted at least a year and possibly longer. The surveillance of multiple scientists' workplaces and residences, the systematic intrusion into their digital lives, the deployment of directed energy weaponry, all of this was sustained over an extended period. A short-term operation conducted by a small number of individuals cannot sustain that kind of multi-year, multi-method pressure on a target. Geographic scope. The cases span New Mexico, Alabama, California, Ohio, and other locations. The individuals responsible for the pattern were operating across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously, or maintaining the operational capacity to reactivate targeting operations across multiple states when needed. This is not a local criminal operation. It is an operation with national geographic reach. Technical capability. The deployment of directed energy weapons against targets in the United States requires not only access to the physical devices, which are themselves sophisticated technology, but also the intelligence preparation that allows them to be used against specific individuals at specific locations. The pattern of life assessment needed to identify when and where a target will be in a location vulnerable to a directed energy weapon attack, then position the weapon and operator to exploit that vulnerability, requires surveillance capability that goes well beyond what a small independent actor can sustain. Counterintelligence evasion. The operation has thus far evaded detection and attribution to a degree that has allowed it to continue across multiple targets over multiple years. This is not easy. The United States counterintelligence apparatus, for all its institutional imperfections, is a sophisticated operation with significant resources. Sustaining a multi-target, multi-method intelligence operation within the continental United States while evading that apparatus for years requires either extraordinary operational security, inside access that compromises the counterintelligence response, or both. Legal exposure management. The harassment campaign against Eskridge was specifically designed, according to Milbour's analysis, to produce visible symptoms in the target that would be interpreted by outside observers as consistent with mental instability rather than as evidence of an external attack. This kind of strategic, plausible deniability is a hallmark of sophisticated intelligence operations. It protects the actor from attribution not by hiding the effects of the operation, but by constructing an alternative explanation for those effects that targets the credibility of the victim. These operational characteristics, taken together, describe an actor with the resources, the technical capability, the geographic reach, the duration of commitment, and the sophisticated counterintelligence awareness of a state-level intelligence service. The two state-level actors with the clearest motivation to target American defense researchers in these specific fields, and with the documented operational history in the United States to sustain this kind of operation, are Russia and China. Russia's intelligence services have a documented track record of using directed energy weapons against American government personnel in the Havana Syndrome cases, of using novel and sophisticated methods against individuals whose activities they wish to suppress, and of conducting operations in the United States that were sustained over years before being detected. A Russian operative was apprehended in the United States with a directed energy weapon in a case disclosed to Congress in 2024. The operational template for what appears to have happened to Amy Eskridge is not hypothetical. It is documented Russian tradecraft applied to a different target set. China's intelligence apparatus has a documented focus on the specific research areas represented by the victims: aerospace propulsion, advanced materials, nuclear technology. Chinese intelligence operations within American research institutions and targeting American researchers with valuable technical knowledge are among the most thoroughly documented counterintelligence problems the United States has faced in recent decades. The systematic targeting of individuals with access to the most advanced American research would be entirely consistent with China's documented intelligence objectives. A third possibility, noted by those with the deepest familiarity with the specific research areas involved, is that an actor within the American defense and research establishment itself may have interest in suppressing the development of certain technologies or in controlling the flow of specific research findings. The intersection of advanced aerospace research, UAP disclosure advocacy, and the specific research areas of the missing and dead scientists creates a theoretical space in which internal actors might have motivation to suppress certain directions of inquiry. This possibility is the most speculative of the three, but it is also the one that would best explain the apparent ability of the responsible parties to manage the counterintelligence response to their operations. The counterintelligence and analytical synthesis of the connected cases of dead and missing American defense researchers produces a set of conclusions that can be stated with precision, and that the FBI's formal entry into this investigation validates at an institutional level. The pattern is real. 11 or more scientists connected to classified defense research have died or disappeared in circumstances that do not survive honest probability analysis as random or coincidental events. The behavioral signatures across the disappearance cases are consistent with each other in ways that require explanation. The institutional connections through specific research facilities and through the commanding figure of General McCaslin create a map of relationships that investigators find significant. The research these individuals were conducting has strategic value to the full range of potential actors who might benefit from acquiring or suppressing it. The directed energy weapon dimension is not speculative. It is documented. The Russian detention case, the congressional disclosures, the Havana Syndrome investigations, the photographic and witness evidence in the Eskridge case. These are not the artifacts of a conspiracy theory. They are documented facts that have been entered into the congressional record and discussed by individuals with direct knowledge of what these weapons can do. The FBI's formal entry into this investigation, without waiting for the standard local law enforcement invitation, is an institutional recognition that the matter exceeds local jurisdiction in scope and nature. Former FBI supervisory agent John Nance, with more than 20 years of experience, including counterintelligence work, has described the correlations in these cases as extremely disturbing. The former British intelligence officer who knew Amy Eskridge personally and who was specifically designated by her as the recipient of her evidence in the event of her death has brought that evidence to Congress and to the public at personal risk. Luis Elizondo, whose documented experience with the government's classified UAP programs gives him perspective on the research environment these scientists operated in, has weighed in on the pattern. General McCaslin's disappearance is the case that the FBI appears to have treated as the jurisdictional trigger for federal involvement. A commanding general with operational knowledge of 80% of the military's most classified programs disappearing without his identifying materials, with only a firearm and hiking boots, is not a local missing persons matter. It is a national security event. And the FBI entering that investigation appears to have opened the investigative space for the connected cases to be addressed simultaneously. What this investigation needs to produce is answers to questions that have not yet been officially asked in the form that generates binding responses. Who conducted the harassment campaign against Amy Eskridge? What does the Tesla Sentry data from Joshua LeBlanc's vehicle show about his activities in the 4 hours it was parked at the Huntsville airport? What did General McCaslin know specifically that would have made his disappearance operationally valuable to any external actor? What do the factory resets on Melissa Casillas's phones, performed before she walked away without them, indicate about her state of mind or about who may have been managing her departure? The answers to those questions exist somewhere in the evidentiary record that the FBI now has the authority and the mandate to access. The congressional pressure that pushed this investigation forward has not dissipated. The public attention generated by the pattern's visibility has not dissipated. And the evidence that Eskridge left behind with Milbor, that has now been submitted to Congress and to the public record, does not disappear because official explanations contradict it. The analytical conclusion of this assessment is specific, and it is grounded in the same probability reasoning that underlies all serious counterintelligence work. Something systematic has been happening to American defense researchers. It has been happening for at least several years. It is connected to specific research areas of high strategic value. It has produced a consistent pattern of deaths and disappearances with behavioral signatures that do not match the official explanations assigned to them. And it has now attracted the attention of the federal investigative institution with the broadest authority and the deepest counterintelligence resources in the United States government. The question is no longer whether this pattern warrants federal investigation. The FBI has already answered that. The question is what the investigation will find and whether the institutional machinery of accountability will follow through on what it finds. On that question, the analysis cannot yet render a verdict. But the investigation is open, and the evidence is there for it to find.